Insurance fraud in the UK has hit epidemic levels. It's costing us over £1 billion every year. That's almost £3.5 million every day. Deliberate crashes, bogus personal injuries, even phantom pets. The fraudsters are risking more and more to make a quick killing. And every year, it's adding over £50 to your insurance bill. But insurers are fighting back, exposing just under 15 fake claims every hour, armed with covert surveillance systems.
That's a subject out the vehicle.
Sophisticated data analysis techniques, and a number of highly skilled police units. They're catching the criminals red-handed.
Just don't lie to us.
All those con men, scammers and cheats on the fiddle are now caught in the act and claimed and shamed. Today, car insurance fraud, a victim story.
I felt absolutely sick knowing that I'd been driving around uninsured all that time. One of the worst days of my life.
A tall tale about a mugging is knocked back.
I'm sorry, you expect me to believe that you've just been robbed by knife point, and instead of phoning 999 from home, you decided to walk an hour and a half to the police station?
Yeah, I thought it was more practical.
And an American woman's appearance on national television leads to her come-on downfall. The City of London Police's Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department, or IFED, is a dedicated team of detectives committed to stopping insurance fraud cheats.
Since IFED started at the beginning of 2012, 1,200 individuals have been either arrested or interviewed under caution, suspected of insurance fraud.
This elite squad has prevented millions of pounds being paid out to criminals in fraudulent claims. From now on, insurance cheats need to look over their shoulders.
Insurance fraud isn't easy money. It has risks and consequences. You can get a criminal conviction and you can go to jail.
Police, don't move, stay where you are!
One particular problem is ghost broking. DS Mark Forster knows how this scam works only too well.
Ghost broking is effectively the unlawful selling of insurance policies. It's done by criminals who will sell you forged documents in the belief that you have bought legitimate insurance cover when in fact you haven't.
The more sophisticated ghost brokers use inside knowledge of the industry to appear legitimate. But people like Alison Middleton of Tradewise know exactly how their scams work and how to spot them.
Our policies are motor trade policies which provide cover for persons that are involved in the motor trade, and the cover afforded under these policies is for a number of vehicles rather than one vehicle which you'd see on a private car policy. Therefore, making motor trade policies attractive to somebody who's trying to set up a ghost broking organisation, because they can put a number of vehicles onto those policies which would then all be flagged up on the motor insurer's database and appearing as genuinely insured.
In December 2013, Tradewise were approached by a member of the public who believed they were insured with the company.
They'd been experiencing some problems in obtaining documentation and getting hold of their broker, and having looked into it themselves, they managed to find that the vehicle was insured through Tradewise by looking on the motor insurer's database.
However, Tradewise doesn't cater directly to members of the public. They decided to take a closer look to see if there was indeed a connection to the car.
We identified that the vehicle in question had been placed on one of our motor trade policies. And that's where our investigation started. The indicators showed that the risk had potential to be involved with ghost broking.
At the same time, IFED had been alerted to a pattern of suspicious activity.
A large number of individuals reported to Action Fraud that they had purchased insurance for their vehicle through a company by the name of Personal Touch.
Web-based Personal Touch insurance was run by just one man based in Andover.
Inquiries showed that this company did not exist. Once we started to look at the bank accounts and also the insurance policies that had been set up in order to facilitate this fraud, it soon became apparent that there was just one individual that was behind all of it.
That individual was James Clark Tomlinson.
He'd set up what looked like a genuine insurance intermediary, and through that company he was supplying members of the public with certificates, cover notes, documentation which they would have believed had been issued by an insurance company and therefore showing that they had a real insurance policy in place.
But the vehicles appeared on the motor insurance database in name only, and there was never any actual insurance cover. Clark Tomlinson was simply pocketing his victims' money.
Approximately 150 victims had purchased insurance through Personal Touch. It was apparently £60,000 had gone through his account in just over a 12-month period.
But it wasn't just strangers who'd found his website that were targeted. He was prepared to deceive those closest to him.
Clark Tomlinson would befriend a number of his victims. He would become friends with them. He would circulate in their communities. He was a car enthusiast, as were a number of his victims.
One of whom was Vicky Small.
I've got a limited edition Subaru Impreza. It's number 6 of 100 Acropolis Rally limited editions that were made in 1993 in Japan.
But as Tomlinson well knew, getting affordable insurance for high-performance cars isn't easy, which made people like Vicky more vulnerable to the scam.
I met James Clark Tomlinson at Bournemouth Pride in 2013. After we'd done the parade and everything, we all came back to my house. And it was there that he was telling not just me, but everybody else about his insurance company or the company that he worked for, how they would beat any other quote by a minimum of 20% or they'll give you £100. Sounded like he knew what he was talking about. He said all the right things. He'd been working in insurance for a long time. I spoke to him about 2 days later, and that was when I took out the policy.
And it wasn't just Vicky who was caught in the fraud.
Every one of those 150 victims thought they had purchased legitimate car insurance to drive their vehicles on the road. In fact, they were not insured at all. They had a false certificate, they didn't have any insurance, and therefore not only were they putting themselves at risk by driving on the road, but also other road users.
Clark Tomlinson even went so far as to offer his so-called customers rewards for recommending others.
I recommended not only friends in the car scene and the modified car scene, I recommended family, friends, people that I've known for years.
The introduction of this loyalty scheme showed how greedy Clark Tomlinson was, how determined and underhanded he was.
A lot of my friends do have high-performance cars and they're a lot younger than me and they do struggle with insurance, you know, the cost of it. So I thought, 2 birds with 1 stone. My friends are going to be getting a really good, amazing deal, not only prices, but a great level of cover, and I'm helping a new company to flourish. You know, I just really wanted to help everybody.
But just 6 months later, Vicky's world crumbled.
A friend of mine messaged me and then phoned me and said that his car, he had a letter from the motor insurance database saying that his car wasn't insured. He tried to phone the number in the Manchester offices of Personal Touch Insurance and he couldn't get through. So then I tried phoning, couldn't get through. And it was then that a couple more people emailed me and then we realised that it was just a massive con. I felt absolutely sick knowing that I'd been driving around uninsured all that time. And unfortunately, I believe for some other drivers, people have had accidents, had points, had fines, lost their cars because they thought they were insured and they weren't.
On hearing the news, Vicky moved quickly.
The next step for me was to alert as many of my friends as possible. One of the worst days of my life. It was horrible. I had a few people come round and see me. There was tears. People were angry. People were shouting.
But for Vicky, things were about to get a lot worse.
Vicky Small had a serious heart condition for some time. Clark Tomlinson was aware of this, and yet, despite the fact that they had become quite good friends and Vicky Small trusted him, he continued to lie and defraud her.
The stress was horrendous, and I ended up in hospital shortly after.
But unbeknownst to him, the man who'd exploited Vicky and others was being tracked by IFED. Initially, he proved as elusive as his fake policies.
We established that a number of the victims knew Clark Tomlinson by various different names. He seemed to frequent different addresses in different areas of the country, and one initial report we had at the very beginning of the investigation, when he was first identified, suggested that he was actually working on a cruise ship.
But before he could sail off into the sunset, IFED officers tracked him down.
When IFED detectives arrested Clark Tomlinson, he was extremely upset. He seemed surprised that the police had managed to find him, and he became very obstructive. He was a very obnoxious individual, so much so that during the police interview, he decided that he'd had enough and didn't want to answer any more questions, and that it was a waste of his time. So he turned off the recording equipment halfway through the interview.
Despite this behaviour, IFED was able to build a watertight case against Clark Tomlinson, and before long, it was time for him to face justice.
In May 2015, Clark Tomlinson appeared at Southampton Crown Court, and he pleaded guilty to 18 counts of forgery and fraud.
Attending court was Vicky, the victim who had at one point counted him as a friend.
When it was time for the sentencing, because he did plead guilty, I felt that I needed to be there.
Clark Tomlinson's £60,000 fraud resulted in a sentence of 4 years behind bars.
No amount of money for me will ever undo the damage that's psychologically and physically been done to me. People like James Clark Tomlinson are just scum. They don't care who they hurt, the consequences they leave behind. All they want to do is get as much money as quick as possible.
Clark Tomlinson was an extremely arrogant individual who thought that the police wouldn't catch up with him. My message to any other would-be insurance fraudster is that you will not get away with your crime, and that the police will catch up with you, and detectives from IFED will ensure that you receive the most severe penalties at court for your actions.
Later, a dodgy medical claim has a whiff of trouble.
Our investigator also noted that the operation was listed as rhinoplasty.
And an unconvincing tale about a mugging is dealt a blow.
The account that you've given me is simply not believable, I'm afraid.
No, okay.
Come on now!
The famous 3 words that give contestants on America's Price is Right game show the chance to make their dreams come true with a big money win. Lucky Kathy Caswell pumped the air as she took to the floor. But would her luck continue?
Kathy. $1,000. And Molly.
801, Drew!
801. Actual retail price is $1,375. Kathy, come on up here.
Thinking her luck was well and truly in, Kathy elbowed her way onto the stage, barely able to contain her excitement.
Nice to see you.
We have a trip to Palm Springs and a trip to Santa Barbara.
But appearing on one of the nation's biggest game shows with millions of viewers exposed the web of lies she'd been spinning.
Oh, I hope you're right. Now she's going to try to beat 80 cents whenever you're ready.
In truth, Caswell was already cashing in, to the tune of thousands of dollars in workers' compensation. Some years prior to her appearance on the show, the former postal worker had claimed that a serious workplace shoulder injury meant that she couldn't stand, sit, kneel, squat, climb, bend, reach or grasp. As a result, she'd been collecting compensation since 2005.
Sorry, Kathy.
So she shouldn't have been able to do this. This, and certainly not this. That's right, in addition to appearing on national TV, Kathy Caswell had also posted a photo on social media that showed her arms high paragliding.
You tell me where that price goes, and you're going to win both trips.
Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara. And when I say 3, flip it up. 1, 2, 3. You got it! Go to Santa Barbara, go to Palm Springs, $5,000 worth of travel.
But in reality, Kathy Caswell was going nowhere except court. Unsurprisingly, her ill-judged Price is Right appearance tipped off investigators that she was pulling a fast one. Evidently, she didn't think through the consequences of being pictured on national TV, standing, reaching, and grasping, things she claimed to be unable to do. On September 11, 2013, she was sentenced to 3 years of probation and was ordered to pay back the agreed amount of $30,000. Finally, it was time for her to shoulder the blame. What do you get when you combine 15 years' experience of policing, hostage negotiation skills, and a degree in psychology? You get Tara Shelton from ICOG. Her unique background means that she can identify fraud more swiftly than normal.
Our specialism predominantly surrounds something called conversation management.
This comes into play when Tara and her team talk to claimants on the phone.
We use very gentle techniques to identify fraud faster, but those techniques are significantly embedded on a cognitive and psychological basis.
For insurance cheats, there's nowhere to hide.
If someone is lying, we'll know.
Often, it's the small giveaways that make Tara suspicious. Things that might not be obvious to you or I, but stand out a mile to an expert. In one recent case, a photographer claimed that he'd been the victim of a serious offence.
He said he decided to go to the local park to take some moody photographs in the bad weather. However, when he got all of the equipment out in the park in order to take the shots, he was approached by 3 youths in hoodies who presented a large knife out of a pocket, threatened him. He then handed his equipment over, went home, and then reported the matter to the police. The total value of the claim was approximately around £50,000, and the equipment ranged from a MacBook through to different types of cameras, different types of lenses, all of which are quite high in value.
Not only was the claimant seriously out of pocket, but his livelihood was on the line too.
We did identify that the claimant was genuinely a paparazzi, quite a well-known paparazzi individual.
Meaning that without his camera, he couldn't work and therefore had no money coming in. As always, before making contact with the claimant, Tara did her homework.
What was interesting when we carried out some further research is he had changed his name on 3 occasions previously, was being again chased by debt collectors, and was now, as a grown man, living with his mother.
It was time for Tara to get a fuller picture of the case.
It's Tara Shelton from ICOG about your insurance claim.
Yep.
Hi, is now still a good time to talk?
Yeah, it's a good time now.
I found the claimant quite a fascinating character because he described a knife point robbery in the most vaguest, shortest, non-emotional detail I think I've probably ever heard.
And there was like about 3 guys, well I wouldn't say about, there's 3 guys there hanging around in the background, and basically they were watching what I was doing. When I went to pack up, I basically got approached, knife point, and I had my equipment taken away from me. And they went one way, and I went the other.
Can you just expand a little bit more on that for me, please?
If someone has genuinely been held up at knife point, it should be either quite a traumatic incident or certainly an incident where you can provide some detail. But there was nothing like that at all.
And I know this might be quite difficult when you try and put it into words, but can you try and describe for me how he was holding the knife in order to make you feel threatened?
Oh, cool. Well, he had it in his right hand, so then he just had it. I don't know. He just had it in his hand. I think that's quite threatening enough as it is. I couldn't believe it myself.
If he couldn't believe it, how did he expect others to? At this point, the conversation started to get even more surreal.
And on top of this, he still remained very kind of non-emotional, but he was also making really inappropriate jokes, which I found quite bizarre, considering you're talking about a knife point robbery.
And their English is quite appalling.
Sorry, when you say his English is quite appalling, what do you mean?
Well, it just sounded like, something out of that Halfords advert.
No, sorry, I don't know that one.
Well, it's like wannabe Cockney.
Would you, Adam and Eve it? At this stage, he probably wanted to put down the dog and bone, but Tara wasn't done yet.
And have you had victims of crime come out and visit you?
No. What do they do?
They help victims of cases like this, just to give them reassurance and any guidance that they
If
can.
they bring a bottle of whiskey, that might work.
But hitting the hard stuff wasn't going to help, and in reality, the photographer had shot himself in the foot. Tara could see right through the snapper's flimsy story.
People scrabble to spontaneously lie. And when they are in a position where they have to spontaneously lie, what happens is the brain goes into a meltdown. The cracks were just getting more and more and more obvious to me.
How confident are you that everything you've told me so far is absolutely true and correct?
Confident. As confident as my memory goes. Not everyone remembers things in great detail.
You sound a bit nervous, that's all.
Well, it is. Actually, this questionnaire is getting a bit long.
Sorry to keep you, mate. For Tara, there was one moment where the photographer's account really started to lose all focus.
The main game changer was actually my natural response to something that he said to me, which was that he walked home quite calmly after this had happened. Even though there was a landline available in the home, he decided not to call 999 there and to walk to the police station. And then I asked how far the police station was away.
According to the claimant, it was just down the road.
When you say just down the road, how far is it?
It's about hour and a half's walk.
An hour and a half's walk?
Yeah.
That is one heck of a long road, and unfortunately for him, it finished in a dead end.
I'm sorry, you expect me to believe that you've just been robbed by knife point, and instead of phoning 999 from home, you decided to walk an hour and a half to the police station?
Yeah, I thought it was more practical.
It's simply not believable, to be honest.
No, okay.
Yeah, okay. Surely a genuine claimant would be protesting their innocence at this point. Tara had heard enough.
The account that you've given me is simply not believable, I'm afraid. I believe the reason the claim has been made is to assist in your financial situation. So, with that in mind, how would you like to proceed?
Well, I mean, is this now going to become like a court case thing now? So what do I do now? Do I just find an attorney now? Do I fight my case?
Well, I'm not here to advise you. I'm the one that is telling you that I've got concerns, and the insurers do have concerns, which is why it has been passed to me.
Finally, the photojournalist accepted that his story had been spiked.
He completely underestimated the level of detail that is required, and ultimately he failed at the first hurdle.
But there was a way to pick himself back up. Tara had already agreed a strategy with the insurance company.
When I outlined that one of the options that the insurer was willing to accept a withdrawal of the claim, he was quite happy to withdraw the claim, thanked me for my time and for my professionalism.
Clearly, he realised that he'd more than met his match.
Well, thank you for your patience, and I know you've been very professional. And wow, that was the hardest interview I ever had.
The newsman had been well and truly scooped. Holidays should be spent on the beach, not in a hospital emergency department. But that's where one unfortunate traveller ended up. SIGA, a company that provides global travel and medical claims services, processed the paperwork. Simon Cook is their head of special investigations.
The customer told us that while she was on holiday in Lebanon, due to an accident, she had to have an emergency operation to her nose.
And that she wanted to claim for the cost on her travel insurance.
The value of the claim was approximately £2,000.
Covering medical costs abroad is all part of the package that SIGA provides.
On the face of it, we had no reason to doubt that this was a valid claim.
And it was only when they began to sniff around that there were concerns.
It is a condition of this particular insurance policy that you contact the emergency medical helpline if you require an operation, so that we can ensure that you're getting the right treatment.
But there had never been any communication from the claimant.
Most genuine customers want to contact our medical emergency helpline because it is quite a daunting experience being in hospital overseas.
And there was one thing in particular which made them sniff danger.
Our medical expert explained that there were no x-rays or any other tests carried out, so they were unsure how they could determine whether an operation was required.
The lack of assessment of her injuries clearly went against normal medical practice.
To perform an operation such as this without first conducting x-rays or some form of tests goes against normal medical practice. Due to the concerns we had with the claim, we decided to conduct a telephone interview with the customer.
Seeger's investigator sensed that there was something iffy about the nose injury story itself.
The customer told us that she'd been chasing her daughter around her sister's flat. Unfortunately, she ran straight into a glass door. The first question that sprung to mind for our investigator was, well, what happened to your daughter? Surely, if the customer was chasing after her daughter round the flat, then her daughter must have hit the glass door first. At this point, there was a long, awkward silence, and we had to actually check whether the customer was still on the line. The customer broke her silence, and she told us that she'd got the circumstances incorrect. She was in fact being chased by her daughter, as opposed to her chasing her daughter.
The story was starting to reek, and the investigator decided to nose around the doctor, who was genuine enough.
However, the doctor did not specialise in emergency medical treatment.
Seeger then took the radical step of appointing an overseas investigator to pay the doctor a visit in person.
Our investigator made an appointment at the hospital to speak with the doctor, and when our investigator arrived, the doctor was well aware that we were going to be visiting. Without even referring to any paperwork, the doctor actually validated the claim and said that our customer had received an emergency medical operation. The doctor actually told us that he had nothing further to add to the situation and left.
Undeterred, the investigator spoke to the hospital receptionist, and it was at this point that things started to get interesting.
She then decided to bring up the official computer records in front of our investigator. Our investigator also noted that the operation was listed as rhinoplasty. This is more commonly known as a nose job.
A cosmetic procedure, definitely not something associated with a medical emergency.
Given the significant inconsistencies with the circumstances the customer provided us with, we were satisfied that the incident involving her running into a glass door did not happen.
They saw right through the story to the likely explanation.
As far as we were concerned, this was a case of medical tourism, and the customer had travelled to Lebanon with the intention of having a nose job whilst on holiday.
Needless to say, travel insurance doesn't cover this type of plastic surgery, and the claim was declined.
The customer initially tried to contest our decision, but after we wrote back to her, she decided not to pursue the claim any further.
Shown that she knows what's good for her, the woman finally walked away.
This investigation just proves that we take a hard-nosed approach to investigating fraud.
Insurance fraud in the UK has hit epidemic levels. It's costing us over £1 billion every year. That's almost £3.5 million every day. Deliberate crashes, bogus personal injuries, even phantom pets. The fraudsters are risking more and more to make a quick killing. And every year, it's adding over £50 to your insurance bill. But insurers are fighting back, exposing just under 15 fake claims every hour, armed with covert surveillance systems.
That's a subject out the vehicle.
Sophisticated data analysis techniques, and a number of highly skilled police units. They're catching the criminals red-handed.
Just don't lie to us.
All those con men, scammers and cheats on the fiddle are now caught in the act and claimed and shamed. Today,
It's the police. Can you open up, please?
the game is up for one fraudster.
You're under arrest on suspicion of fraud by false representation.
One man mistakes a bus for his bed.
You can see by the position of his head, he's beginning to doze off. You've got to feel a little bit sorry for the chap in that it's an unfortunate accident.
And one claimant has an unlikely career change.
He presented himself as a security doorman. Over time, his career fortune seems to have blossomed into him becoming a surgeon.
With 29 million customers nationwide, it's inevitable that Aviva get their fair share of fraudulent claims. But whilst many of these are from opportunists trying their luck, sometimes they're faced with a fraud on a much larger scale. Angela Bailey and her team found themselves dealing with exactly this type of case.
Within one of our claims locations, they identified a couple of claims where the claimant's addresses and telephone numbers linked. So these were referred into our Claims Fraud Intelligence Unit, who then reviewed the claims for further exposure.
The same people involved in numerous claims was strange enough, but as they continued to investigate, that wasn't all they discovered.
There were 7 policies that had all been taken out by the same bank account, and all of these policies linked back to Mr. Kadri. We identified that Mr. Kadri had taken out 7 policies, all by the same credit card with us.
Holding numerous insurance policies isn't a crime, but Abdul Kadri had already received 2 payouts, totaling £12,000, and Aviva's investigation revealed that this was potentially just the tip of the iceberg.
In total, there were 16 claims, which resulted in 60 injury claims submitted to Aviva with a value of £300,000.
Such a high volume of claims and injuries was a huge red flag, and with around £300,000 on the line, Aviva's investigation continued, and it wasn't long before their suspicions were confirmed.
Mr. Kadri appeared on a couple of the claims, but the majority of were names and addresses where people had no idea that the claims had been made for them.
So Kadri had been submitting claims using other people's details, and it appeared he wasn't too picky about whose identities he used.
People that he'd put in these claims were linked to him by friends, family. On the whole, they had no idea that the claims had been submitted.
By now, Kadri had already fraudulently received £12,000, but now they were onto him. Aviva set the wheels in motion to bring this fraudster to justice.
Once Aviva had sufficient evidence, we contacted the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department at the City of London Police to take the investigation further.
Since it was formed in January 2012, IFED has convicted over 700 fraudsters, and they didn't waste any time in taking up this case. Simon Stiles was one of the officers who worked on the investigation.
When the case was referred to IFED, all we had at that stage was a number of fraudulent claims, all linked together by a single bank account. We did some further inquiries around the details of the vehicles that was used in the accidents. We found that these people either didn't exist, as far as we were aware, they didn't live where they said they lived, and they didn't actually own the vehicles that they were reportedly driving at the time of the accidents.
It was looking as though Mr. Kadri was not only impersonating claimants, but shockingly, investigators were also concerned that he was potentially fabricating some of the crashes.
We believe that a number of them did take place, but also a number of them were what's called staged, where 2 vehicles are brought together deliberately to make it look as though it's a proper accident.
IFED began putting together a detailed profile of their suspect, and it pointed to one conclusion.
Well, looking at Mr. Kadri's bank account, it looked as though he had some means. He didn't appear to be working at all. There wasn't a salary, there wasn't a legitimate source of income, and therefore we think he was the mastermind behind this.
It was time to speak to Kadri face-to-face, so DC Kate Sibley and her team paid him an early morning visit at his home address.
Hopefully we're going to be finding telephone numbers that have been used, names that have been used to open up the policies.
Officers arrive at Kadri's address and immediately secure the front and back of the house to avoid anyone attempting to leave the property.
It's the police, so can you open the door?
The longer we spend outside, knowing that someone's in there, the more concerned we get as to whether they're going to attempt to escape, arm themselves, or hide the evidence or just attempt to destroy it.
Eventually, their knocks are answered.
Good morning. My name's DC Einsman from City Police. Mr. Kadri, I'm going to arrest you, OK? You're under arrest on suspicion of fraud by false representation.
Still to come.
We seized a number of handwritten documents which had basically an outline of the accident.
As the search gets underway, IFED officers hit the jackpot.
It was a whole diary of his criminal activity.
In the UK, there are around 6,000 accidents involving buses each year. When someone claims they've had an accident on a first group bus, it usually lands on the desk of Lee Ingram.
It's alleged that in late 2014, a gentleman was injured on one of our buses when it took a corner too abruptly and he was thrown from his seat.
Now, most of us have been caught off balance on a bus before, but usually the only harm done is a bruised ego. However, when the passenger in this claim lost his balance, the results were disastrous.
He sustained a black eye, a nasty cut to his head, and also a soft tissue injury to his neck. This claim would have been worth about £9,500, and that would have been made up of the personal injury treatment costs and legal fees arising from bringing the claim itself.
As with every claim they receive, First Group investigated further, and their first port of call was a fancy bit of onboard technology.
All of First buses are fitted with telematics equipment. Generally, what they do is they record changes in speed, changes in direction, sudden acceleration, deceleration. It's quite easy to see if a bus has turned quickly. It would show a record of this happening.
With the telematic technology showing no evidence of any sudden turns, the team switched their attention to the onboard cameras in the hope they might provide some answers as to exactly what happened.
The CCTV footage shows this gentleman sitting in one of the front seats. You can see by the position of his head he's beginning to doze off. It's a nice sunny day. The shadows thrown across the bus can sometimes have a soothing effect. It's quite warm, so it's not surprising he's probably fallen asleep.
Now, pay attention, folks. It certainly looks as though he's starting to drift off. Next stop is the land of Nod. He's going, gone. Oof, that was a nasty fall.
When you see him fall off his seat, face first into the stairwell, you know that's hurt. You've got to feel a little bit sorry for the chap in that it's an unfortunate accident.
As painful as it may have been, First Group remained certain of one thing.
We do see some cases, obviously, where people deliberately will throw themselves to the bus floor. This isn't one of those instances. It clearly is a situation where the gentleman has fallen off his seat. But the difference here is that he is alleging that this is caused by the bus movement, and it's not. It's actually caused by him being asleep and being unable to stay on his chair as the bus is moving quite normally.
Let's see that again. Eyes peeled for the mysterious quick turn. Nope, the only thing I can see turning is his fellow passengers' heads.
You'll notice from the actual footage itself that no one moves or shows any real issues with the way the vehicle's moving or travelling. You've got the young boy there sitting in the luggage rack, and he doesn't budge. If the vehicle had suddenly turned the way that the claimant has said, he would have needed to hang on, otherwise he's going to get thrown out of that luggage rack, because you've seen the way that the gentleman's come off his seat.
Fortunately, First Group's buses are also fitted with cameras on the outside. So, just to be sure that the footage from inside wasn't misleading, Lee's team checked out every angle, just in case they'd missed the quick turn the passenger was claiming against. Did you see it? Nope, looked like smooth driving to me. Let's take another look.
It showed absolutely nothing at all, so it's more a case of what it didn't show than what it did show in this instance. There's no doubt at all that this is a genuine incident where the chap has fallen off his seat, but are First to blame for that? Absolutely not.
Armed with such convincing evidence, First Group put this claim to bed.
It was quickly decided that there was no way that we were at fault for this gentleman's fall. We quickly rejected the claim, and we haven't heard since.
The UK jewellery and watch industry is worth more than £5 billion. But it's not all about the money. From inherited diamonds to wedding bands, jewellery often has a sentimental value. Thankfully, insurance is there to cover our prized possessions, should they get misplaced, broken or stolen. When one woman lost a treasured engagement ring, John Beadle, RSA's counter-fraud manager, and his team were on hand to help.
This lady had a policy, a household domestic policy, which would cover the normal perils that you would expect, fire, theft, and in this case it also covered accidental loss, both within the insured premises and externally as well.
To John and his team, the lost engagement ring appeared to be a run-of-the-mill claim.
She said that she had gone for a walk in a local beauty spot and she'd lost her engagement ring, which was valued at £2,400, it being apparently a handmade design. It sounded initially like a genuine claim, and of course, as we would do normally, we began arrangements to settle her claim for her.
Before any money could be handed over, RSA needed some proof that the customer had owned the item. But as luck would have it, she had a clear photo of herself wearing the ring. A very clear photo.
Unlucky for her, when we examined the photographs, we found that they were timed and date stamped 3 days after the alleged loss of the ring.
The claimant had been caught out by the metadata that's stored within all digital images. We've come a long way from the film cameras of yesteryear. When you take a snap today, you aren't just capturing the image, you're also recording the time and date it was taken, and sometimes even the exact location of where you were at the time. For insurers, these hidden details can be gold dust, but for potential fraudsters, they can be a nightmare.
I'm never surprised by things in this job. I've been in it quite a long time, but this is a clear, outrageous cheek.
To RSA, it was crystal clear that she was trying it on, and I'm not talking about the jewellery.
She was making a claim for a very precious item, an engagement ring, which you would naturally be very upset about if you had lost it in those circumstances. And we were doing our best to try and compensate for this loss, when actually it's quite clear that the loss never occurred at all.
Armed with the incriminating photo, RSA reported the case to the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department, who wasted little time.
They paid her an unannounced visit at her place of work, and lo and behold, she was, at that time of their visit, wearing the said engagement ring, which she had allegedly lost.
Talk about being caught red-handed. It'll come as no surprise that this woman didn't receive the payout she was hoping for, but that's not to say she left empty-handed.
She was arrested and taken back to the police station, where she was interviewed under caution, and she admitted her guilt. It was decided to deal with her by way of an official police caution.
This woman learned the hard way that committing fraud comes with serious consequences.
You will end up on the insurance fraud register, which will cause you problems in obtaining insurance cover in the future.
As head of fraud at Aviva Insurance, Tom Gardiner knows a thing or two about accidents and injuries. The extensive experience of Tom and his team came in handy when one of their customers was involved in a collision, where all 5 occupants of the other car claimed they'd suffered whiplash.
So a straightforward whiplash injury on its own may have a value between £1,500 and £3,000.
But as Aviva began the lengthy task of processing the 5 claims, one of the passengers, a Mr. Shah, had a slightly different account.
In the first place, he presented a claim for straightforward whiplash injuries. Over time, that escalated astonishingly into really quite catastrophic injuries, including being in a coma for 2 months, multiple fractures, broken jaw, broken teeth, and blackouts.
Was he in the ejector seat? Now, it's fair to say that some whiplash injuries can worsen over time, but this was taking it to a whole new level, as the list of injuries went on to include a fractured skull, blindness in one eye, and loss of taste. As far as Aviva were concerned, though, the entire claim left a bad taste in the mouth, because Mr. Shah's injuries weren't the only details that were ever changing.
There are a number of inconsistencies with Mr. Shah's claim, including his employment status. In the first place, he presented himself as a security doorman, and over time, his career fortune seems to have blossomed into him becoming a surgeon. We suspect that was all about trying to inflate his claim for wages and loss of earnings.
From doorman to surgeon in a matter of months. Now that's some career progression. But Tom thinks he knows the reason behind Mr. Shah's meteoric rise up the ranks.
If he had had a genuine whiplash claim as a doorman, his claim may have had a value of several £1,000s. If he was a surgeon with such catastrophic injuries, it would have been hundreds of thousands.
It'll come as no surprise that with such dubious inconsistencies on the claim, Aviva decided to look into this one a little further.
We carried out detailed investigations. In particular, we arranged for engineers to inspect the damage to the vehicles, which proved to be wholly inconsistent with the circumstances and the injuries presented.
With the damage to Mr. Shah's car a million miles away from what the claim suggested, Aviva turned their attention to the alleged injuries.
I think we were surprised by the inconsistency and escalation of the injuries. Medical evidence was never presented.
Refusing to be stitched up by a pseudo-surgeon, Aviva sent Shah and his solicitors packing. But they soon discovered that they were dealing with a man who was as determined as he was deluded, when Shah instructed another solicitor to pursue his claim for injury.
We were particularly surprised that firms were prepared to accept Mr. Shah's claim without validating him or the truth of his injuries. And it was Aviva that notified the solicitors and alerted them to their client's fraud.
But with a potentially life-changing amount of money in his sights, Shah was not going to give in easily and enlisted an astonishing 12 different solicitors to pursue his claim over the course of the investigation. However, without any proof of his injuries whatsoever, none of his army of solicitors were successful in securing Shah a payout. And in a shocking turn of events, investigators discovered yet another bombshell, this time involving the car that allegedly caused the incident.
We also interviewed the driver of our insured's vehicle, who was complicit in the fraud and eventually put his hands up and admitted it was a scam.
So they were all in on it. This claim was dodgier than Mr. Shah's medical credentials.
What we're quite clear about is that this was an entirely bogus accident and entirely bogus injuries.
Tom and his team compiled their evidence and handed it over to the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department, who gladly took on the case.
We then worked with them to bring a prosecution, and eventually Mr. Shah was sentenced to 6 months in prison, which we were very pleased with.
For Aviva, the outcome was a great success.
In total, we avoided all 5 claims, including Mr. Shah's catastrophic injuries, which potentially had a value of several hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Pets can be a great addition to the home, but caring for them isn't cheap. In fact, the average trip to the vets costs around £300. Thankfully, pet insurance is there to take the brunt of the cost when our furry friends are injured or become ill. But just like any other type of insurance, it's open to spurious and exaggerated claims, as Simon Wheeler and his team from Agria discovered when they dealt with a dog owner who had an upsetting visit to the vets.
This was undoubtedly a very sad incident. A young puppy had heart failure and had sadly died.
Good morning, how can I help? Hi, I picked my puppy up on Thursday. Yeah. On some Saturday, I think, he passed away. How do I go about claiming?
After receiving a claim form from the grieving owner for £500, Agria started looking into the claim. But as they read through the policyholder's paperwork, something jumped off the page.
We looked at the policy details and we found that the policy had only been set up less than 2 hours before the puppy had died. To all intents and purposes, if it had been a clean-cut accident and the puppy had died, the policyholder would have been covered.
The problem was that this was anything but clean-cut, and the timing of the puppy's passing was a real concern for Simon and his team.
The death of the puppy was very, very, very close to the start of the policy, and ordinarily young puppies don't just drop dead without any warning. What we suspect is that the puppy had shown signs of being ill, and the owner was then deciding to make sure that there was insurance in place to cover that pre-existing illness.
If the poor little pup was showing signs of illness before the insurance policy was taken out, then unfortunately the owner's policy would not be valid.
Pet health insurance is no different to human health insurance or motor insurance. If your grandma's got a chronic heart condition, you can't take out an insurance policy to pay for private medical fees for that heart condition. It's pre-existing, it's already there.
To establish whether the puppy had been showing any signs of illness before the policy was taken out, they spoke to the owner.
He died of heart failure on the 9th. We didn't have a clue that anything was wrong with him before that.
Sounds fair enough, but Agria wanted an expert opinion too. So they also spoke to the vets who treated the puppy, although their account of what had happened was remarkably different.
On the 30th of July, the puppy had been seen for its primary vaccinations and was, to all intent and purpose, healthy.
A week later, the puppy was brought in to see the vet again, but this time the poor thing wasn't so well.
The puppy was coughing, was marginally distressed.
Over the next 2 days, the puppy's condition continued to deteriorate. And after repeated visits to the vet, the poor pup sadly passed away. But there was more bad news to come.
The vet unequivocally told her that the puppy wouldn't be insured as the condition was pre-existing. It started before the insurance was set up.
You might think that being told by a vet that your dog is definitely not covered would be the end of the matter. Not in this case.
On hearing that, the policyholder quite candidly asked the vet if they could just lose the veterinary history or amend the veterinary history so that the insurance would pay out. The vet obviously told the policyholder, no, if I change my notes, if we change the veterinary history, that would be fraudulent.
The owner asking for the records to be changed was the final straw for Agria. As far as they were concerned, this claim was 100% null and void. But just to make sure the message sank in, they put it in writing.
That included the fact that she'd asked the vet to act fraudulently and amend the veterinary records.
Hi, I recently made a claim about one of my puppies that passed away. I got a letter back telling me that I'd made fraudulent a claim, so I'd just like to kind of put things straight.
She was quite stressed at that point. She was quite frightened because she tried to act fraudulently and obviously been rumbled.
They need the response to be in writing from you, please. And if I don't write to you what happened? Then it will stay as it is then, and we couldn't sort of reassess it. We need some further information. I believe that's all in the letter they sent you. Okay, but if I don't respond, nothing will happen. I'm not going to be, That's it, that's right, yeah.
Unsurprisingly, Agria is still waiting for that response.
I think that policyholder won't be doing this type of thing again. They were very shaken by the fact that, one, they'd been discovered, and two, they foolishly tried to take some money from an insurance company that they weren't entitled to.
Previously, in Birmingham, IFED's DC Kate Sibley tracked down Abdul Qadri, who was suspected of masterminding a huge motor insurance scam with an estimated value of over £300,000.
You're under arrest on suspicion of fraud by false representation.
With Qadri under arrest, the team began searching the property for evidence.
We're going to be completing a search of your address, okay? I'm looking for certain things, insurance documents, and anything to do with motor vehicle insurance.
With the search well underway, the team uncover a mountain of suspicious paperwork.
We're in one of the main bedrooms at the moment, and it's just sackfuls of paperwork, documentation. Quite a lot of it relating to what we're investigating. We've got documents relating to the insurance company, all the names, telephone numbers, vehicle registration numbers that we're looking for that are in relation to this inquiry. We're probably about halfway through the search now, but we're finding stuff all the time.
As the bags of evidence mounted, it was starting to become clear that this was a meticulously planned operation.
We seized a number of handwritten documents which are basically an outline of the accident, notes of where the accident took place, how it took place, but we found a number of those, driver details of the third-party vehicle, victims' details, insurance company details, and obviously full description of how the accident happened with a nice little diagram.
To investigators, the revealing detail in the documents far exceeded their expectations.
It was a whole diary of his criminal activity, and we were very pleased to actually take possession of it. We knew at that stage Mr. Qadri had a lot of explaining to do.
Faced with such damning evidence, it wasn't long before Qadri was banged to rights.
Mr. Qadri was charged with fraud by false representation, and he was bailed to attend the local magistrates course in early January 2014.
But IFED were in for a nasty surprise. because when Kadri's day in court arrived, he was nowhere to be seen.
The UK borders were informed in case he'd left the country and returned, and inquiries were made through relatives and family and previous addresses. Unfortunately, we could not find him.
Wherever Kadri may have run to, IFED were certain of one thing.
It was now a waiting game. We knew he'd show up. We didn't know where and we didn't know when, but we knew he would.
Sure enough, eventually IFED got their man.
We got a call that Mr. Kadri had been arrested at Heathrow, having returned on a flight from Afghanistan.
With Kadri finally back in the UK, IFED did the polite thing and greeted him at the airport.
He was a bit surprised as we were waiting for him. I don't think he thought that we'd take so much trouble over him. But we take trouble over catching anybody who commits insurance fraud or any other crime in the UK.
Now in the hands of IFED, there was no way Kadri was going to escape this time.
Within 24 hours of Mr. Kadri setting off the plane after he arrived from Afghanistan, he was before the Crown Court in Birmingham. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Mr. Kadri immediately put in a plea of guilty. The judge sentenced him to 38 months imprisonment for his offences and an extra 3 months to serve for failing to return on bail and fleeing the country.
Kadri thought he was in line to receive over £300,000. In fact, he got over 3 years behind bars.
I believe Mr. Kadri received such a long sentence due to the organised nature of these incidents from the notebook that the detectives found when they raided his address. This has quite clearly been planned to some detail and with every intent of financial gain through fraudulent means.
IFED have since made a proceeds of crime application against Kadri to recoup the money he fraudulently gained from Aviva. Insurance fraud in the UK has hit epidemic levels. It's costing us over £1 billion every year. That's almost £3.5 million every day. Deliberate crashes, bogus personal injuries, even phantom pets. The fraudsters are risking more and more to make a quick killing. And every year it's adding over £50 to your insurance bill. But insurers are fighting back, exposing just under 15 fake claims every hour, armed with covert surveillance systems.
That's a subject out the vehicle.
Sophisticated data analysis techniques. And a number of highly skilled police units. They're catching the criminals red-handed.
Just don't lie to us.
All those con men, scammers and cheats on the fiddle are now caught in the act, unclaimed and shamed. Coming up, a gentle afternoon drive leads one unsuspecting motorist headfirst into a crash for cash scam.
There's absolutely no reason for those brakes to come on. This is an induced collision.
One claimant needs to brush up on his communication skills.
He couldn't stop himself calling me love.
The theft did happen, love. Oh, I keep calling them.
And a moped rider's claim falls flat.
Crucially, he wasn't at the point on the road where he alleged the accident had happened.
The City of London Police's Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department, or IFED, is a dedicated team of detectives committed to stopping insurance fraud cheats.
Since IFED started at the beginning of 2012, 1,200 individuals have been either arrested or interviewed under caution, suspected of insurance fraud.
This elite squad has prevented millions of pounds being paid out to criminals in fraudulent claims. From now on, insurance cheats need to look over their shoulders.
Insurance fraud isn't easy money. It has risks and consequences. You can get a criminal conviction and you can go to jail.
Police, don't move, stay where you are!
As anyone who's been involved in a collision will tell you, the aftermath can be an unpleasant and often costly experience. But an increasing number of motorists are turning to technology to protect themselves from being unfairly blamed in the event of an accident.
Over the last few years, as costs have come down, more and more people have been making use of their own dash cams in their vehicles, and these have proven to be very useful for things such as insurance claims.
In the 12 months leading up to February this year, dash cam sales increased by a whopping 918% in Britain. They're usually seen in commercial vehicles, sat next to the furry dice. But with cameras now costing as little as £30, you can see why the public has started to catch on too. Like this driver here. But as he took his brand new dashboard camera out for its maiden voyage, the last thing he was expecting to happen was this. After the accident, the driver's insurance company, LV, received a claim from the person behind the wheel of the silver car in front, Miss Alina Khan.
The total that was being claimed for was over £26,000, and that came about because of the cost of repair to the vehicle damaged, but also a credit hire car to replace that car, the storage of the damaged vehicle, and to cover personal injury to Ms. Khan herself.
Fortunately, the dashcam footage supplied by their customer provided LV with the perfect eyewitness account of what had happened. However, upon examining it, they realised something wasn't quite right and passed the case on to the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department, who took up the investigation.
Khan said that she'd been driving through the town centre of Manchester at quite a busy time of day, lots of other cars and people around, when she'd been caused to come to an emergency stop, and that's what caused the car following her to collide with the back of her. From what Ms. Khan told her insurance company, this appeared to be a genuine accident, much like any other that happens up and down the country every day.
After watching the footage, IFED investigators soon shared the insurer's concerns that this was anything but a genuine accident.
There were a number of things about this claim that raised suspicions. Okay, so as you can see, this is Ms. Khan's silver Audi in front. The road is clear in front of the silver Audi, and there it goes, the brakes come on, but there's absolutely no reason for those brakes to come on. There's nothing in front. This is an induced collision.
As if Miss Khan slamming on her brakes for no apparent reason wasn't suspicious enough, the footage also highlighted something else that pointed toward foul play.
What the dashcam footage also shows is that the following driver had absolutely no way of avoiding a collision because he can't move over to the left. He's being boxed in by another black Audi vehicle. This is quite a classic kind of MO. You have to have another vehicle there to either act as a decoy to nominally cause the brakes to come on, or to force the following vehicle, the target, that it's got nowhere else to go, so it has to crash.
As the two cars wait alongside each other at the traffic lights, their trap was set. And seconds after the impact, we see the black Audi, which has been positioned alongside the whole time to prevent the victim from avoiding the collision. Convinced that they were dealing with a classic case of crash for cash, IFED continued with their investigation, and as they looked into Khan's car, the evidence really began to pile up.
Part of the cost of this claim were the courtesy car replacement vehicle for Ms. Khan's Audi, a black Audi, and the investigation revealed that the car boxing in the other driver was the car that she later used as a courtesy car.
So, not only had Khan deliberately caused the crash with an unsuspecting driver, she also had the nerve to claim for a courtesy car, when in fact it belonged to her accomplice. But Khan's lies didn't end there.
According to Ms. Khan, her silver Audi was undrivable, and so it needed to be in storage at high expense. When we looked at traffic cameras, it was still being driven around, so it clearly was still drivable.
With every element of Khan's claim proving to be fraudulent, IFED turned their attention to the claims management company, who were pursuing the claim on her behalf, AMC Claims Limited in Manchester.
AMC's role was to work between Ms. Khan and the other driver's insurance company in organising things such as the credit hire and any medical examinations that were required. On the face of it, AMC Claims was a legitimate claims management company like any other.
However, further investigation revealed that the owner of AMC Claims Limited, Sarfaraz Ahmed, was actually friends with the driver of the black Audi, Kamran Yassin, and that wasn't all.
The deeper we investigated into the circumstances of this collision, the more it became apparent that it was all set up from the start, and they had a plan. The vehicles were added to insurance policies just before this all happened, and there was clear evidence that they'd been in close contact leading up to and just after the collision.
With proof that the drivers of both Audis and the owner of the claims management company were in on the scam from the start, IFED arrested all three. This web of fraud had been exposed thanks to one trusty eyewitness.
The dashcam footage was hugely significant. It gave us lots of lines of investigation to follow, and it enabled us to confront Ms. Calm with the real circumstances of what had happened that day. At trial, all three of those people were found guilty by a judge. I don't think any of those three people were surprised to be arrested, but certainly they showed no remorse whatsoever throughout our investigation or at court.
Justice was served when Alina Khan received a 14-month suspended sentence, and Kamran Yassin, who was behind the wheel of the black Audi, received a 16-month suspended sentence, along with 280 hours of community service. The owner of the claims company, Sarfaraz Ahmed, also pleaded guilty and awaits sentencing.
I think this goes to show that insurance fraud isn't a victimless crime that happens with a load of paper being moved around somewhere. It happens on our streets. It is almost like daylight robbery. I think if these three hadn't have been stopped, they'd have carried on orchestrating collisions on the roads and hurting members of the public. Sadly, in this country, we have had serious injuries and deaths from crash for cash scams, and that shows why it's so important to investigate and stop people like this.
Still to come, a pothole prang is investigated.
The nature of the pothole didn't look to us to be of the type of severity that would cause someone to come off their bike.
And an apparent victim of theft isn't in the mood for talking.
Before we even got to discuss anything, the customer strangely decided to terminate the call.
Increasingly, insurers are turning to dedicated claims handling companies. ICOG use specialist techniques to weed out the genuine claims from the bogus ones. Managing Director Tara Shelton has dealt with hundreds of claims over the years. With one of the most common claims being high-tech camera equipment, Tara and her team have so far saved the media industry over £1 million. And of all the cases of nicked kit she's dealt with, one in particular stands out.
He had hired equipment, he said, to make a music video over the weekend in the famous Brick Lane in London. He reported to having made this music video and the equipment was therefore returned to the home address and was stored there overnight so that he could return the equipment as per the hire agreement.
But it was at this point our claimant's fortunes took a turn for the worse.
When he said that he got up at 5 a.m. for work the following morning, he'd found that the rear conservatory had been broken into and the entire equipment that had been hired had actually been stolen.
With almost 100 grand's worth of high-tech kit missing, most of us will be bending over backwards to try and get things sorted, but not this chap.
This particular claimant was very difficult to get onto the phone. He would make many excuses as to why he wouldn't be available to speak with us. But we made it quite clear that the claim couldn't progress without this call taking place. And eventually he gave up his lunch break on one particular day to speak with us.
But rather than move his claim forward, the phone call well and truly put the skids on it.
What he explained on the phone call was very alarming because he had absolutely no depth and no detail to offer about the incident. And one example of this was what it was he actually saw when he came down the stairs and saw that the equipment had been taken.
So if you can just go nice and slow and clear for me, please. Just tell me in your own words exactly what happened.
Well, basically, you've got the cameras, basically done the shoot, got the cameras back, and next thing I know, I'll get up in the morning, and basically, they were gone.
Unsurprisingly, such a vague account wasn't exactly ticking all the boxes for Tara.
But what was even more interesting about this particular claimant is he said there were about 20 people involved in that project.
An extensive cast and crew would surely mean that Tara could finally get some answers.
I'll need to know the names of the people involved in this.
You need to know the names? Why is that?
Because we need to speak to those people. It's quite a lot of money that's gone missing here. So it is sort of proportionate to the value of the claim, you see. So can you tell me who was involved in the video?
Well, not really.
He might not have been much of a talker, but judging by the level of cover he'd taken out, this fella clearly knew his stuff.
This particular policy is quite a specialist scheme policy where it's purchased from a broker, and it's predominantly for people who actually do work in the media industry. So in other words, you would need to be suitable for the policy by having that experience.
So it sounds like this chap was rubbing shoulders with the likes of Spielberg.
And what's your occupation?
I work in a warehouse.
Right, okay. And then what do you do there?
Yeah, stack shelves and stuff, love.
Unlike the shelves in the warehouse, this claim wasn't stacking up.
This particular claimant had hired the equipment, providing references from the media industry to substantiate that he had that experience.
Now, when you hired out this equipment, did you have to provide any references?
No, I don't think so, love.
Yeah, okay, cheers, thanks.
So he doesn't remember that he provided references to hire the kit, didn't have the right experience to hire the kit, didn't want to give the names of his cast and crew, and couldn't provide any of the details Tara was asking for. It was hardly going well, but as always, Tara was keen to keep it professional.
He couldn't stop himself calling me love, and I don't really like that very much.
Okay, could you do me a favour? I don't mean to be rude, but could you stop calling me love?
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's just that this is a professional call, you see, so I just appreciate
all right,
going both ways, if that's okay.
Okay.
That doesn't sound like too much of a challenge, does it?
So you did the shoot and you got home about 8:30.
Yes.
How did you get home?
The van, love. Sorry for calling you that.
But with nerves getting the better of him, he just couldn't help putting his foot in it.
What did you get paid for doing this shoot?
I didn't get paid at all, basically, love. Sorry for calling you that.
And how many, if any, previous burglaries has that property suffered?
I don't think there has been any, love.
Okay,
Sorry for calling you that. I can't help it. All.
Did the theft actually happen?
Yes.
By now, Tara well and truly had this chap's number.
He's probably the most poorly planned fraudster I think I've ever come across.
The theft did happen, love. Oh, I keep calling that, sorry.
I think it was a combination of a high-stress response because he was lying, but also he didn't have the almost intellectual ability to carry the story off. So he was just almost filled with frustration inside himself for not being able to, in essence, play his role and win me over. It just wasn't working. It just wasn't working.
I just needed to understand, I'm afraid, as the insurers would need to understand, if you wanted to make some money from making a video, what your next steps would have been after you'd filmed it.
I produced it, and then basically, that's it. Produced it, and then basically, that's it, love, really. I keep calling you, for God's sake.
When I explained to him that I did have concerns with the claim, he became very upset.
Okay. Is there anything else about what happened you think I need to know?
No.
Okay. So I've got some major concerns with the claim, if I'm honest.
Why is that?
Well, what concerns do you think I would have?
I don't know.
The net was closing in on this questionable claimant. As ever, Tara and her team had done their homework and already examined his finances, and one transaction caught their eye.
And it was just evidently clear from the very beginning that he was caught between us and whatever agreement he had made about disposing of the equipment for potentially financial gain. And we did actually, by working with the police, locate a large payment into his bank account after I had spoken to him.
The evidence was mounting, but the claimant's biggest faux pas was still to come.
And unfortunately for him, we proved that he wasn't filming in Brick Lane making a music video. He was actually at work because he clocked himself in and out
Time was well and truly up for this chap.
The conclusion of this claim was the right one. We invoked the fraud condition, and the policy was voided as if it never existed.
Hey, I think the time's up now because I've got to go. I'm going to go and get them at the window.
Can I just tell you then before you go?
Yes.
If you're not going to allow me the opportunity to explain because you're going to go, there appears to be several breaches in the policy.
Okay.
Even those that want to try and defraud insurers and plan and plan and plan and think they've got their story watertight will still get found out. He thought it would be easy. He thought it would be easy, and it isn't easy.
There are over 180,000 road accidents each year, and statistics say that if you're on two wheels, then you're more likely to be seriously injured. Peter Wake is a partner at law firm Wakeman's, who represents Halton Borough Council. And in 2010, they received a claim from a moped rider who was holding them responsible for a recent fall.
The initial claim brought by Mr. Condren was for £50,000 worth of damages, that's personal injury damages and loss of earnings, in relation to an alleged accident on the highway when he said he'd fallen off his moped as a result of an alleged pothole in the road.
The rider was Daniel Condren, and according to the details on his claim form, the effects of the fall were long-lasting.
The injuries that he alleged were a broken right leg alongside psychological injuries as well. After the accident, Mr. Condren instructed a local firm of personal injury solicitors to bring a claim against the council. The basis of the claim was that his accident was caused by a pothole in the road, and therefore he alleged the council was liable for failing to maintain the road.
Faced with a hefty bill and keen to avoid further mishaps with other road users, the council took a closer look at the pothole that had caused so much damage.
There was nothing obvious to suggest that the accident hadn't occurred, as he alleged, but we were concerned because the nature of the pothole didn't look to us to be of the type of severity that would cause someone to come off their bike.
But Condren wasn't having any of it and decided to take the council to court, which is where Peter and his team came in.
The council instructed Wakeman's to act on their behalf. As part of our investigation, we carry out specialist fraud inquiries in relation to background searches, investigations, using all our systems and expertise in an effort to identify whether there's anything that might suggest a claim is fraudulent. In the course of these inquiries, we established that the police had actually attended the location of the accident immediately afterwards, and therefore we were able to contact the police officer who had been in attendance and who had prepared a police report.
As anyone who's been involved in a road accident will tell you, a reliable witness is crucial.
She confirmed that she had been in the location after the accident had happened, and she saw Mr. Condren at the side of the road.
So far, the claim made sense.
Crucially, he wasn't at the point on the road where he alleged the accident had happened. He was a considerable distance away from that point at the side of the road.
Their stories didn't quite match. And unfortunately for Mr. Condren, the officer also mentioned a conversation she'd had with him.
He'd also confirmed to the police officer that he didn't know what had caused the accident, but that he'd hit the curb and skidded. He made no mention of a pothole causing the accident, or indeed a pothole at the location that he subsequently alleged.
With evidence like that, it'll come as no surprise that Condren's case really did hit the skids when it got to county court.
We'd obviously produced a detailed witness statement from the police officer. It was at that point that the civil claim for compensation was almost immediately withdrawn. So after the claim had been withdrawn, obviously the council was firmly of the view that it had been a fraudulent claim.
But if Condren thought he could just walk away from his tall tale, he was sorely mistaken.
Very often when civil claims for compensation are withdrawn, the claimants will think that that's the end of the matter. Importantly, from our perspective, where we've identified fraud, we'll work with our clients and advise them in relation to whether or not further avenues can be explored. Wakeman's therefore advised the council about the prospects of pursuing a contempt action against Mr. Condren in respect of what we both felt was obviously a fraudulent claim.
When the case was heard at the High Court, Condren still refused to come clean.
He maintained that his accident was caused by a pothole and that he wanted to pursue his claim. However, he was not able to offer any plausible explanation for either the evidence of the police officer or the contents of the police documents, and in particular what the police officer had recorded Mr. Condren to say at the time she'd attended the scene.
Satisfied that Condren had attempted to defraud the council to the tune of £50,000, the High Court judge didn't hold back.
The judge identified in the course of the contempt proceedings what Mr. Condren had actually done was use the opportunity to try and make a bit of money. The judge described Mr. Condren's actions as criminal and referred to the very negative effect that fraudulent claims have, not just on local authorities, but also the insurance industry and society as a whole.
The judge told Condren that the system is seriously damaged by lying claims. Those who make such false claims, if caught, should expect to go to prison. And he meant it. For trying to cheat his way to a £50,000 payout, Condren was sentenced to 6 months behind bars.
The message that this case sends out to claimants is that the courts simply won't tolerate fraudulent claims for compensation. As the judge confirmed in this case, people who bring fraudulent claims and are caught should expect to go to prison.
In this day and age, most of us can't imagine life without our trusted smartphone. But with around 300,000 phones reported stolen to the police each year in the UK, it's easy to see why so many of us purchase mobile phone insurance. However, when it comes to making a claim, insurers hear all kinds of excuses, as Simon Cook from Sega is all too familiar with.
The customer told us that while she was on holiday in Benidorm in Spain, she unfortunately became the victim of a theft. The customer claimed for a purse, £300 in cash and a high-end mobile phone.
By the sounds of it, this thief had got away with quite the haul.
The total value of the claim was approximately £800.
To Sega, this was starting to look like a textbook case of holiday pickpocketing.
As with the majority of the claims that we deal with, we had no reason to believe this claim was anything other than genuine.
So, with no time like the present, Sega started processing the claim.
The customer provided us with various documents to support the claim. In addition, for any mobile phone claim, we always ask for the IMEI number, which is the unique reference number that's designated to the handset being claimed.
Luckily for Sega, they have access to a high-tech database that stores information on every mobile phone.
When we inputted the IMEI number into the database, it did show that the phone was blocked. However, we also noted that the phone was blocked 4 weeks prior to the theft occurring.
So the phone was blocked before she left the UK. Makes you wonder why she would have taken a phone with her in the first place.
Due to the concerns with the claim, we did contact the customer to ask her why the phone was showing as blocked 4 weeks prior to the theft occurring. The customer didn't really have an explanation for this, so we decided that we were going to need to speak with the network provider to find out what information they had available.
As you might expect, the mobile network provider was cautious about releasing any personal information without the customer present, but Sega had an innovative solution.
So we decided on this occasion that we would do a conference call between ourselves, the customer, and the network provider. When we got through to the network provider with the customer on the line, before we even got to discuss anything with the network provider, the customer strangely decided to terminate the call.
I suppose the connection could have cut out.
We tried to contact the customer again to get her back on the line, but unfortunately we couldn't get through to her.
With the claimant clearly not in the mood for talking, Sega got back on the blower with someone who was.
We decided to get back in contact with the network provider, who proceeded to provide us with various pieces of information to help us with our investigation.
They also informed Sega about a phone call they'd had with the claimant before she left for her holiday that may be of interest to them.
They told us that the customer reported to them that the phone had been stolen in the UK.
Sega now knew for certain that the claimant's story was 100% phony.
We had no option but to decline the claim in full and invoke the fraud condition of the insurance policy, which does in fact state that if any part of the claim is found to be invalid or fraudulent in any way, we will not pay any part of the claim. We didn't hear anything further from the customer, and to be perfectly honest, we would have been extremely surprised if we had.
Simon and his team had averted another potential fraud.
Insurance fraudsters probably don't realise what systems and databases are available to the insurance industry to help with our battle against insurance fraud. This is a classic example of opportunistic fraud. She certainly wasn't a master criminal.
Insurance fraud in the UK has hit epidemic levels. It's costing us over £1 billion every year. That's almost £3.5 million every day. Deliberate crashes, bogus personal injuries, even phantom pets. The fraudsters are risking more and more to make a quick killing. And every year, it's adding over £50 to your insurance bill. But insurers are fighting back, exposing just under 15 fake claims every hour, armed with covert surveillance systems.
That's a subject out the vehicle.
Sophisticated data analysis techniques, and a number of highly skilled police units. They're catching the criminals red-handed.
Just don't lie to us.
All those con men, scammers and cheats on the fiddle are now caught in the act and claimed and shamed. Today, a travel insurance cheat gets a one-way ticket to jail.
Mr. Gordon's criminality, as far as I'm concerned, currently stands at one of the most prolific fraudsters that I've managed to come into contact with.
A badly executed motor claim runs out of gas.
Unfortunately, they hadn't got their story straight. One talked about it happening in the afternoon, and the other one said it happened in the evening. That's not possible.
And a false injury demand gets the treatment it deserves.
It didn't actually happen. You'd get thrown further off your seat if you had hiccups.
Holidays should be a time to kick back and relax. But if the brake starts to break down, then travel insurance is there, whether you need help during or even before the holiday. Unlucky Umesh Gordon's holiday never even got off the ground. He had to cancel his entire trip after having paid in advance for flights and accommodation.
He submitted a claim for a medical condition which meant he couldn't go on his holiday, and it was in the region of £4,500.
Matthew Crawford Thomas is Intana's fraud manager. Intana is a claims management specialist, handling claims on behalf of insurers. The company required Gordon to back up his claim with relevant paperwork.
All the documentation that he'd submitted to us appeared legitimate.
But then, a chance conversation led Matthew to seriously question the claimant's version of events.
It was a off-the-cuff remark I made to a fellow fraud expert that enlightened me that Mr. Gordon had actually submitted a claim in 2004 for very similar or the same circumstances.
Maybe Gordon was incredibly unfortunate when it came to summer holidays. Either way, Matthew decided to take a closer look at the details.
Flights on all occasions for all the claims that we'd found were all legitimate flights with various airlines.
So far, so genuine. But it turned out that Gordon was winging it with the air travel.
He was prepared to lose a little amount of money, anything between £80 to £150 on those flights, because the accommodation that he was reportedly booking was absolutely and 100% fake.
The flight tickets may have been real, but the accommodation bookings, which made up the bulk of the compensation payouts, were forged, as was the other paperwork.
Mr. Gordon submitted bank statements and medical certificates that on the face of it were legitimate. However, further investigations found out that these documents were in fact totally fraudulent.
As far as Matthew was concerned, Gordon had never had any intention of going away and had never been ill. Membership of the Insurance Fraud Investigators Group allowed Matthew to widen his investigation into Gordon. His findings were explosive.
I uploaded data into their system of the fraud that I'd found for Umesh Gordon. This uncovered fraud dating back to 2004 with 28 claims for 9 insurers amounting to over £113,000.
This was jumbo-sized insurance fraud.
Every single claim from 2004 to 2011 was for the exact same modus operandi. He sustained an injury and/or illness. All the doctor's stamps were stamped by exactly the same doctor.
These dodgy medical certificates were submitted to prove he was too unwell to go on holiday. The sickening scale of his fraud meant investigators started to look into his background.
They subsequently found out that he actually worked for Leicester City Council Benefits Department. We then secured his holiday record for the period that we knew he was committing insurance fraud, and it subsequently transpired that he didn't in fact have the right amount of time booked off for the holidays in question.
Far from being too ill to go on holiday, this proved Gordon had been well enough to work his normal 9 to 5 in the office. Matthew wasn't prepared to let Gordon just walk away from his travel insurance con.
To find such an array of fraud dating back over such a long period of time, I felt that it was personal and needed to be brought to justice. I personally wrote 28 statements, which totaled over 60 pages.
With such a weight of evidence, Matthew's next move was to present his findings to IFED, the City of London Police's Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department.
They arrested Mr. Umesh Gordon, at which point he denied all criminality and said that it looked like someone had either stolen his identification or actually stolen his laptop.
Trying to portray himself as a victim was just one more deception, but Gordon had reached the end of the road.
Upon further investigations of his laptop, they found a drive with a big note on there saying insurance claims. It was at that point that Mr. Gordon, I believe, gave up the ghost.
Having worked to exorcise the fraud from the start, Matthew was there in person to see the conclusion of the case.
I attended Leicester Crown Court for the sentencing of Mr. Umesh Gordon.
Justice was finally served in the £113,000 swindle.
The judge gave him 2 years due to the fact that he had actually admitted fraud sooner rather than later. He is currently at Her Majesty's pleasure. Mr. Gordon's criminality, as far as I'm concerned, currently stands at one of the most prolific fraudsters that I've managed to come into contact with. Bearing in mind what he did for a living, for him to submit such a large amount of claims to the industry for such an elongated period of time, it beggars belief, to be brutally honest.
As does the decision to risk his successful career and reputation by committing fraud.
It just goes to show that no matter what you do for a job, people are always prepared to commit insurance fraud if they think they can get away with it, but not on my watch.
Later, Bus CCTV puts the brakes on a claim for multiple serious injuries.
Do you see any contact with the eye or ribs of either of these people on the bus? No, because it didn't happen.
And justice is delivered to a postal fraudster.
Mr. Cotman was quite upset after his arrest, and I think that's probably because there was such damning evidence that we recovered on his computers.
Recent figures show that there were nearly 150,000 road traffic accidents reported last year in Great Britain. Clearly, some fraudsters think they can slip in a false claim unnoticed. But without a watertight cover story, their chances are sunk from the beginning. Ursula Jello is LV's Head of Financial Intelligence and Crime Solutions. Ursula's team recently investigated a claim from a Mr. Williams, who said he'd been involved in an incident with an LV customer, Mr. Lee.
We had a call from Mr. Williams to let us know that he'd had an accident. He explained it was a significant one and that it happened at a crossroads where he'd collided with a third party.
Mr. Williams was driving east in his Vauxhall. Driving south was Mr. Lee in his BMW. At a set of crossroads, it was alleged that both cars collided. As further details emerged, it became clear that LV was dealing with an extremely high-value claim.
Within both those cars at the time of the accident, they alleged they both had 3 passengers each. So we actually had a total of 8 personal injury claims as part of this claim. As a result of that, our actual total claim by the end of our investigation was around £500,000. That is a significant amount of money.
It certainly is. But right from the start, there were doubts about the £500,000 claim.
A couple of things that absolutely didn't add up about this claim was, based on what was described, it was a significant accident with extensive damage. We had no witnesses and we had no emergency services called. That's unusual.
You're telling me? Unusual, if not suspicious. With the amount of money on the line, further investigation was needed and a forensic engineer was appointed.
Insurers use forensic engineers for a number of things, but mainly actually to clarify what happened in the event of an accident. They can tell by looking at the car whether the damage is consistent with the circumstances that have been described. And in this case, they absolutely weren't consistent with what we were told about the accident.
The location of the damage on the cars was significant.
The circumstances that were given meant that the damage had to be on one side.
The left-hand side of Williams' car and the right-hand side of Lee's car.
Actually, having investigated and looked at the vehicles, the damage was on the opposite side of where it should have been.
As shown on the photos. If that wasn't suspicious enough, there was also a major question mark over Lee's car.
The vehicle at the time was not even drivable. There was a significant transmission problem, and therefore it wouldn't have even been able to drive, let alone being involved in an accident.
The claimants were clearly trying to send LV in the wrong direction with a fake story about an accident that never happened. Further evidence then emerged about the undrivable car.
We identified that actually Mr. Lee's car had previously been involved in an accident that caused exactly the same damage to the vehicle that was now in our claim.
What a coincidence. For a car that couldn't be driven, it was apparently getting around a lot.
That claim was actually turned down with the other insurer because he'd failed to disclose some modifications about the car at the policy inception.
So the previous claim had hit the skids too. LV went back to the claimant to get his side of the story.
When we spoke to Mr. Lee about the information that we'd found about the previous accident, he still absolutely denied any knowledge of that accident happening.
More inconsistencies emerged when the passengers who were supposedly in the cars at the time were interviewed.
Unfortunately, they hadn't got their story straight. One talked about it happening in the afternoon and the other one said it happened in the evening. That's not possible.
In fact, nothing about the claim was possible, and it showed.
This wasn't the most sophisticated. Their stories didn't match up. The cars weren't even drivable at the time of the claim. It just really was shoddy.
LV was determined to take the case further.
It was very clear that we needed to do a bit more than just not pay the claims.
They referred the case to the City of London Police's Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department, and the officers interviewed some of the people who'd supposedly been in the cars.
3 of the claimants confirmed that actually the accident didn't take place and their claims were absolutely fraudulent.
These 3 were given cautions. But the case against the 5 other men went to court. Williams, the driver of the car insured with LV, received 8 months, and Lee, the owner of the undrivable car, got 12 months.
LV were really pleased with this result. It's not okay to commit a fraudulent claim. And as a result of doing that, you will be found out and you will be put in prison.
DI Dave Hindmarsh of the Metropolitan Police's Roads and Transport Policing Command heads up an elite team of officers who combat vehicle crime.
If you are convicted, then you must expect that you will receive a custodial sentence.
For all the millions invested in technology to detect insurance fraud, sometimes you can't beat good old-fashioned police work, like in this case.
It came to us from one of our uniformed officers who was out on the street. He'd been doing routine patrols when he stopped a car. The car was registered to a London driver. In fact, it was registered to the person who was driving it, but the insurance policy was registered up north in Daventry with our driver who was stopped at the time as a named driver. The car was ultimately not insured, so it was seized.
But this wasn't the end of the story, not by a long way.
Several days later, the same officer stopped another car, virtually in the same circumstances, in that it was a London car with a London driver. However, the insurance policy was for an address in Daventry, again with this person as a named driver.
Either a lot of drivers were moving from Daventry to London and forgetting to update their details, or something more sinister was going on.
The officer who stopped the second car was immediately suspicious and started questioning the driver as to how they had obtained their insurance policy. And that had come through an advert on an online market site.
The driver said that the advert was for an insurance broker, someone who, for a fee, uses their know-how to find cheap insurance for a client. It can be a legitimate business, but when it's fraudulent, it's known as ghost broking.
The ghost broking scam works because they offer cheap insurance. Maybe it's to people who are high-risk drivers, multiple penalty points on their license, etc. And you will provide your details and the cash, and you will not know what the ghost broker then sends to an insurance company.
All you can be sure of is that the ghost broker will change small details, so the quote from the insurer is cheaper than a policy with all the correct information.
The significance of these two policies which highlighted this ghost broker, both being in Daventry, is simply it is a lower insurance premium, it's a lower risk area. The difference will be hundreds of pounds between a policy taken out in London and a policy taken out in places such as Daventry.
To the unwitting customer, it appears that the broker has got them a much cheaper deal, even with the fee. The results of the investigation into the online advert provided the breakthrough that led to the next stage of the case.
We were happy that we'd established through our various intelligence indices where the advert had been placed and who had placed it.
That person was Milad Ahmed. In early 2013, Dave and his team moved in to shut down his fraud.
Right, this morning we're off to an address in East London.
Dave and the team arrived before dawn to execute the search. Raids are always scheduled early to ensure that the suspect is home.
Just keep cover up in the rear, would you?
It's important to guard the exits in case a suspect decides to make a run for it. Once everyone is in position, the officers are ready to make their move.
Hey, morning, please. Could you open up, please? Good morning. Come in. Thank you.
The occupiers let us in, so we'll just be explaining why we're there, and hopefully we'll start a search in the next few moments.
Although cameras didn't gain entry to the property during the search, it proved very fruitful.
The significance of the items that were found on that search showed that though the computer equipment had been used to take out policies of insurance for various people, so they were a really key piece of evidence for us.
After the search, the equipment was forensically examined and conclusively linked Ahmed to the fraud. His motor insurance con had finally stalled, and the next stop was court.
He pleaded guilty purely on the strength of the evidence that we had uncovered. He received 5 months imprisonment.
As far as Dave is concerned, The sentence sends out a strong message to would-be ghost brokers.
It's illegal, you can't do it, and if you are convicted, then you do stand the risk of going to prison.
First Group's buses carry around 1.7 million people every day, and passenger safety is a huge priority. Lee Ingram works for Transportation Claims, which handles claims for First Group. Every accident that results in a personal injury case against the company is thoroughly investigated. But not everything is as it seems at first glance.
It was alleged in early September 2014 that 2 ladies had been thrown from their seats due to a bus braking heavily.
This was in reaction to a car in front that had stopped to turn right. According to the claim, the women had suffered multiple serious injuries.
The injuries alleged were soft tissue injuries to the neck. One of the ladies was alleging an eye injury. There was an exacerbation of a pre-existing spinal condition, some injury to the ribs. All of these sorts of injuries would be commensurate with being thrown around a bus into the metal parts of the bus, the poles and the seats in front.
The value of the claim was therefore considerable.
Both of these claims combined would have been around about the £20,000 mark, and that would have covered the injuries themselves, the loss of earnings, treatment fees, and also the legal bills arising from bringing the claim.
According to First Group's records, the incident was real enough.
No one's denying that this is a genuine situation where a bus driver has had to brake heavily. So we've established that something has happened. The next thing we need to do is to prove whether the lady's injuries have been caused by this incident.
First Group buses are fitted with multiple CCTV cameras, so the next logical step was to check the recording from the day of the incident. All seemed normal at first.
So what we're seeing is a nice journey through what looks like sort of countryside type area.
The women in question are sat in the top right of the frame.
When I'm reviewing the footage, I'm expecting to see something like a zero-gravity space transmission with bodies flying around in slow motion, ricocheting off the inside of the bus.
Expecting to see being the operative phrase. The emergency stop is coming up, which supposedly resulted in multiple injuries to the women.
There's definitely an incident there. The bus has had to brake.
The passengers on the top deck and the driver can be seen reacting to the sudden braking. So let's see what happened to the 2 women. If what they claimed occurred is true, you're about to see something distressing. Brace yourselves. Oh, is that it? Am I missing something? According to the women, the incident had caused multiple serious injuries to the neck, eye, ribs and spine. But the footage put a very different spin on things.
There's nothing like what's actually been said. There's no sign of these 2 ladies being thrown from their seats, as has been alleged. We've got claims for rib injuries, eye injuries. Do you see any contact with the eye or ribs of either of these people on the bus? No, because it didn't happen. So this footage is just great in that it totally refutes anything that they're saying has happened.
No matter how many times you look at it, there's no way the footage shows an impact that could have resulted in multiple injuries. There's certainly no eye injury, although they may want their eyes tested if they think the footage backs up their claim. Their case is further undermined several minutes later when they reach their stop, get off the bus and stroll away, seemingly without a care in the world and showing absolutely no signs of injury. To make themselves seem more legitimate, the women had taken on legal representation.
I quote from one of the solicitor's comments, the force of the braking threw the claimant off her seat. That's utter bobbins. It didn't actually happen. You'd get thrown further off your seat if you had hiccups.
It was hard to swallow that the claim had come in at all.
Naturally, we sent the CCTV footage to the claimant's solicitors.
In most cases, that brings everything to an abrupt halt.
Unusually, we did actually receive a reply back this time saying that the claims were withdrawn. That's all very well and good, but it would be nice sometimes to just get a response saying, I'm sorry for wasting your time. I've been doing this job for 28 years and that's never happened yet, but a man's got to have a dream.
One day, Lee, one day. Ordinarily, when something you sent through the post goes missing, it's irritating. But if your whole business relies on posting products to clients, it could be disastrous. Missing post is something that Royal Mail takes very seriously. They've been providing a first-class service delivering our letters and parcels for the last 500 years. So when they heard about multiple postal losses affecting one person, they set up an investigation.
Royal Mail received around 90 claims for compensation of mail relating to mail being sent by Mr. Milan Cockman, being sent to various addresses throughout the world. What he was claiming that the items were actually lost in the post.
The claimant was involved in an online business which entailed supplying memory modules for digital storage. But there was a major problem that was affecting the business. According to him, almost every order he sent out was going missing. And he was having to claim back compensation from Royal Mail.
Because of the high volume of claims that were made by Mr. Cockman, Royal Mail Customer Services down in Plymouth have a separate investigation team, and they raised their concerns with myself, saying that the price that he was claiming, £50 per packet, and he'd been paid around £4,700, was excessive, and then I took on the investigation from there.
With such a large sum of money being delivered into his bank account, suspicions were raised. The investigation turned to the paperwork supplied by the claimant in support of each of the 90 payouts.
I looked at the invoices and they appear to be scanned.
This was immediately cause for concern, as claims require original documentation. The investigation then turned to the high-value products being sent out.
I then contacted the company where Mr. Cockman alleged that he brought them from, and they confirmed that the memory module was values, in fact, around £6 or £7 and not £50.
Was it possible that someone involved in memory storage could just forget the price of the product?
We also looked on the internet myself and again found that you could buy these memory modules for around £6, £7, not the £50 as Mr. Cockman had claimed.
By inflating the price by 8 times the true value, the claimant was posting a huge profit from the compensation payouts.
Having gathered proof of the fraud, I then contacted an inspector, a police inspector, and arranged for the arrest of Mr. Milan Cockman. We searched Mr. Cockman's home address and we recovered a number of computers which were forensically examined by Royal Mail's forensics team. And we also recovered a number of invoices which showed the actual amount Mr. Cockman had paid for each of the memory modules.
But the strongest evidence was, naturally, stored away digitally.
Mr. Cockman was quite upset after his arrest, and I think that's probably because there was such damning evidence that we recovered on his computers.
The case had fraud stamped all over it, and the claimant was eventually taken to court.
Mr. Cockman was found guilty of all the charges under the Fraud Act. He was sentenced to 4 weeks imprisonment, which was suspended for 18 months, 180 hours unpaid work, and had to pay compensation for £2,500 to Royal Mail.
The result of the trial sent out a strong message.
Royal Mail were very satisfied with the outcome of the case, and I think it shows that we will prosecute for every fraud offence.
Insurance fraud in the UK has hit epidemic levels. It's costing us over £1 billion every year. That's almost £3.5 million every day. Deliberate crashes, bogus personal injuries, even phantom pets. The fraudsters are risking more and more to make a quick killing. And every year, it's adding over £50 to your insurance bill. But insurers are fighting back, exposing just under 15 fake claims every hour, armed with covert surveillance systems.
That's a subject out of vehicle.
Sophisticated data analysis techniques, and a number of highly skilled police units. They're catching the criminals red-handed.
Just don't lie to us.
All those con men, scammers and cheats on the fiddle are now caught in the act, unclaimed and shamed. Today, an insurance scam takes its toll.
These families have been broken due to their involvement in this fraud.
A dubious home insurance claim fails to get off the ground.
She then, quite bizarrely, suggested that two crows had entered her property on two separate occasions and caused very similar damage. Pretty implausible, really.
And a fake personal injury claim takes a tumble.
Once we looked at the CCTV footage, he just didn't have a leg to stand on.
Fraudsters seem to think that making a false claim involves little or no risk. But lying on legal documentation or in court actually carries a heavy penalty, as insurance cheats are increasingly finding out. Ursula Jello, LV's head of financial intelligence and crime solutions, worked on a case in which a taxi driver claimed that his car had been hit by one of their policyholders.
Jamil was driving along the road when our insured pulled out onto Mr. Jamil's taxi.
The resulting collision meant that the taxi driver was claiming for compensation.
The claim was for Mr. Jamil himself from an injury perspective. The damage to his vehicle, hire of a temporary car and storage. In addition to that, he was actually carrying two passengers at the time who both also put personal injury claims through. In total, the claim that was put forward totalled £145,000.
Maybe he'd left the meter running. It was a staggering amount of money for what sounded like a fairly minor collision, involving him, his passengers Farhana Kazmi and Shamila Salim, and an LV-insured driver. Further investigation was called for.
At LV, we have a number of indicators that tell us if we should be looking into a claim that might be suspicious of fraud. In this case, there were a few indicators that were met. Things like having a claim come through very close to when the policy is set up, which is what happened in this case. As we carried out further investigations, we found that actually the addresses that had been provided as part of the claim and also mobile phone numbers had also been used in very similar claims across the industry with other insurers. And actually we got in contact with some of those insurers and found that actually the claims were very, very similar and were definitely connected, and therefore we actually had an organised fraud ring.
If they were right, they'd uncovered criminality on a huge scale, involving multiple people and collisions. Ronan McCann from law firm Horwich Farrelly also worked on the case for the insurers affected. Initially, he focused on the suspicious addresses and the people who supposedly lived there.
It was my view that these policyholders didn't exist. And when we had investigators going to these properties, they were able to discover that they did not.
But to move the investigation up a gear, they also needed to test Mr. Jamil's version of events.
To find out what really happened, we sent out a forensic engineer. He identified that actually the damage to the vehicle wasn't consistent with the circumstances presented to us as part of the claim. In addition to that, he was able to understand that at the time of the accident, despite the third party saying that he was driving along, actually the car was stationary at the time. And that was quite damning.
The forensic engineering evidence drove away any doubts.
At this stage, it became clear to me what really happened. The organisers of this fraud had secured the cooperation of a number of different individuals and had taken their vehicles away, driving one into the other when one of them was stationary.
And it wasn't just the LV collision where the cars were proved to have been stationary at the time they sustained the damage.
This was a great piece of evidence which was common to each individual case. So we then were able to build up a picture of this fraud ring and were able to see that the common features included the damage to the vehicles, in the fact that they were stationary when damaged, the fact that the policyholders didn't reside at the properties that were given. It was my view that these claimants, having signed witness statements, claim forms, were telling lies.
The insurers agreed and refused to pay out.
We did decline the claims, but actually the claimants then issued proceedings against us for their losses. So is that a surprise? Actually, to the insurance industry, that's not. That's something that we see every day, especially when it's organised fraudsters.
Driven on by greed, they seem to think that they can use the law to intimidate companies into giving them money. Legal action is an attractive route for fraudsters, because if they win, they get a payout, and if they lose, there's no comeback. Or at least that's what Mr. Jamil and his associates, including Kazmi, assumed. Ronan thought differently.
I recommended to the insurance company that instead of simply allowing claimants to discontinue, that we proceed with a separate application to transfer the matter to the High Court and to seek to pursue them in contempt of court by way of a prosecution which could result in a jail term.
The tables were about to be turned on the fraudsters, and they would now be the ones being pursued through the courts. With the stakes raised, there was a surprising development in the case.
Unusually, I received a telephone call from Farhana Kazmi, one of the claimants involved in the LV claim. She telephoned me to say that she was really sorry for being involved, that the claim was in fact dishonest, and what should she do? To that, I confirmed to her that she should simply tell the truth, send a letter to the court or a statement to the court, and to myself, I said that would have the effect that the court may well be more sympathetic.
She took his advice and made a full confession.
A sentence from her letter puts this into context. I am truly sorry for what I've done and the time that has been wasted. I've wanted to come clean ages ago and was scared of the consequences.
True to her word, she then stuck to her honest version of events under the pressure of cross-examination.
She stood firm and confirmed that this accident was staged, that she wasn't involved in it, and that she was apparently going to get 1/3 of the money.
She made a credible witness, and in the end, the three others, Salim, Jamil and Aziz, admitted the charges. For falsely trying to claim £145,000, they were hit with a combined total of 22 months in prison.
Farhana Kazmi, who had been quite courageous, was handed a 12-week sentence which was suspended for 6 months.
The much smaller sentence reflected her honesty.
There's a very sad side to this story, which is the human cost.
All the fraudsters were parents, and in some cases were the sole breadwinners for their families.
These families have been broken due to their involvement in this fraud. They were the authors of their own misfortune, and this really sends out a message to anyone getting involved in fraudulent claims to stay well away.
Later, a phone claimant's story lacks the ring of truth.
And what date was it that this happened?
And a shocking injury leads to a bogus compensation claim.
That's the point where his leg is snapped and the bone is probably on the outside of his body by now.
Queues, overcrowding and cancelled trains. All part of the commuting experience for the 4 million people who use public transport to get to work in England and Wales every day. As if that's not bad enough, one man recently got home to discover that he'd lost his phone during the journey. Andy Morris is the Chief Marketing Officer for Assurance Solutions, a company that provides cover for mobile devices.
We received a call from this particular claimant. They had lost a high specification iPhone.
Thank you for returning my phone call. The reason I needed to speak to you, sir, was just about the claim that you have with us at the moment for your missing mobile phone. Okay, so can you just talk me through what happened on the day that your phone went missing, please? I had my lunch over there in town centre. Yeah. I just, usually I do lunch. I just had the burgers over there. I was over there having burgers. Then I know that I had a mobile with me.
It was only later that he realised he'd lost the phone. In line with standard procedure, the case was reviewed by the company's claims handlers.
We have a unique sort of fraud scoring system which will identify trends or likelihoods or people who have a propensity to submit a false claim. So this particular claimant was a little bit vague, which is not uncommon for people when they've lost their phone.
When was the last time that you made a phone call from that phone or sent a text message? I think about 2 o'clock.
Sorry?
About 2 o'clock. 1:30, 2 o'clock.
So around 1:30, 2 o'clock. So after you finished work?
Yeah.
Okay, that's no problem at all. And what date was it that this happened?
The date, exactly. Could you check here on your system because my memory is very bad. That's why I lost my mobile.
The claim was flagged as needing further investigation, and the fraud team interviewed the man in more detail.
Have you ever sold a mobile phone at all?
Sorry, what?
Have you ever sold a mobile phone?
Sold?
Sold, yeah.
No, I didn't sold.
You never sold a phone? Okay.
No.
And have you ever advertised a mobile phone up for sale for either yourself or for somebody else in the past 12 months?
No.
Okay.
He sounds pretty certain, but it turns out his faulty memory has let him down again.
You also advised that you'd never sold a phone before and you'd never put a phone up for sale for yourself or for anybody else. Okay.
I did before somebody else. Not for me.
Okay, so who was that and when did you do that?
He was my friend.
Okay, and when did you do that?
About 1 month before.
But the absent-minded claimant was forgetting something else, something very important.
One of the amazing things about this case is the evidence that we obtained was that the claimant was advertising for sale on an online sales site the same phone, exactly the same specification, with the same contact details, personal contact details that he'd submitted for the claim form.
As part of our assessment, what I've done is I've put your contract telephone number you're claiming on, and it shows me a recent advert that's been placed for an iPhone 6 64GB. Okay, just stating that that phone has gone up for sale. Okay, and that phone was put up for sale since you took out this contract for your iPhone 6 64GB. Okay, and so can you just explain that for me if you've never sold a phone?
I'm just wondering, I didn't sold any kind of mobile. I told you I just sold it once for my friend.
Yeah, so that was for the Galaxy Note. But I can see that you've placed an advert using your contract telephone number to sell an iPhone 6 64GB.
From my email address, yeah?
From your contract telephone number.
From my contact telephone number?
Yeah.
Despite the claimant's vague response, the situation was crystal clear. The phone that he was claiming a payout for was also on sale. The suspicion was that he'd never lost it and that he was attempting to get a double payout.
Our fraud team telephoned this customer to question, was there any mitigation or was there a reason for it?
You would need to be able to provide an explanation with regards to that.
The claimant had informed our agent that somebody had stolen their identity.
Maybe it's a scam or something like that, because I haven't got anything like that.
Okay, what I would advise you to do then is to have a look at that advert. If you feel as if somebody has set up a fake advert and you need to get written confirmation from them that a fraudulent advert has been set up using your information.
Double whammy. According to the claimant, they'd lost their phone and their identity had been stolen. But shortly afterwards, his run of bad luck and memory loss ended.
We were unexpectedly contacted 3 days later by the claimant, who said there was no further action necessary, that amazingly they had found the original phone and that they no longer needed our services.
It was an incredible twist of fate. As soon as he'd been informed the claim wasn't going to go any further, the phone in question turned up and the claim was dropped.
If you're thinking about defrauding because it's just £500 or it's just a little handset, actually it's still a financial crime.
Accidental damage to your possessions can leave you spitting feathers. But that's where household insurance comes in, even if the culprit isn't human. Scott Clayton is Zurich's Claims, Fraud and Investigations Manager and recently dealt with a claim from a policyholder who'd gotten into a flap.
The initial claim that came in was that she said that she'd been woken at 6 o'clock in the morning with a disturbance downstairs. On going downstairs, she found out that a crow had actually come into the property and it was trying to escape. So in its panic, or doing whatever crows do, then it was making quite a mess in its attempts to escape.
According to the claimant, the feathered offender had caused mayhem. The claim was accompanied by photos, which showed the extent of the damage, if you look closely enough.
I mean, she said that a fireplace had been damaged by this crow. The carpets, not just in her living room, but in the hallway and stairs had been damaged, which needed cleaning. Curtains had been soiled and damaged. A mirror had fallen off the actual wall. When you added all the items up, it was around about £5,500.
A considerable sum, which seemingly flew in the face of the photographic evidence. But at this stage, there was no reason to doubt the policyholder's word. In Scott's experience, this type of wildlife claim isn't a particularly rare sighting.
It's actually not hugely unusual for a crow or a bird to actually find its way into a property. When they do find themselves cornered and they're trying to escape, then frequently we do get claims for the mess that they cause.
It was only on closer examination that foul play was suspected.
We investigated the claim like we normally do and looked into the background of the policyholder, and we managed to find out that she'd actually made several previous claims with other insurers. So we looked specifically into one claim because it had very similar hallmarks to this one and managed to establish that, sure enough, she'd made a virtually identical claim to our previous insurers for damage caused by a crow.
This certainly ruffled feathers with the fraud team. They were convinced that there had never been a crow invasion and the policyholder was attempting to bring a false claim.
We sent an investigator out to see the policyholder, took a statement from her. She actually denied that she'd made any previous claims for bird damage. She denied having previous claims with other insurers, but clearly we knew that was different. So we ultimately challenged her on those facts, and she eventually admitted that she had made a previous claim with another insurer for this damage.
But even then, she tried to wing it with an unconvincing explanation.
She then, quite bizarrely, suggested that 2 crows had entered her property on 2 separate occasions and caused very similar damage. Pretty implausible, really.
Her bird-brained cover story wasn't going to fly, and there would be no payout from Zurich.
That wasn't the end of it. She obviously knew the repercussions for what she'd done, so she probably in an attempt to try and make things easier for her, wrote us a letter of apology. The letter said, "I'm very sorry for the misleading statement I gave to you on your visit to my home, and I now wish to withdraw my claim, and again I wish to apologise for any inconvenience I may have caused you and your company, and I do hope this will bring this matter to a close. I would very much appreciate this."
The case may not have gone any further, but there are still serious consequences.
Not only did she lie to Zurich when she took the policy out, but she lied to her previous insurer. Although she admitted that she'd made a fraudulent claim, it doesn't stop there because she's going to find it very difficult to obtain insurance in the future.
With no payout and a big question mark against her financial prospects, the whole saga has left the policyholder with nothing to crow about.
If you're going to lie to your insurance company, don't underestimate how much they collaborate in terms of the data and information. And if you get caught lying, the consequences of doing that are quite severe, either through lifestyle, employment, or ultimately getting future insurance.
Losing your keys is normally just one of those challenges that life throws at you every so often. But if lost keys fall into the wrong hands, the consequences can be severe. Mark Chiappino is the Counter-Fraud Claims and Policy Validation Manager at Direct Line. A customer, Mr. Singh, recently got in touch to lodge a claim for items he said had been stolen in a burglary.
We received a 9-page list from him detailing the items that had allegedly been stolen. This included 2 mobile phones, 2 laptops, 4 cameras, the £2,000 cash, and £35,000 worth of jewellery.
A 9-page list is all very well, but a high-value insurance claim requires additional proof of ownership.
We asked him to substantiate the amount of jewellery that had been taken, and he subsequently emailed us several photographs.
These show the extent of the pilfered plunder. The burglars were lucky to net such a large haul, not least because, according to Mr. Singh, they gained entry to the property purely by chance.
His wife had dropped her keys in the street, and the thieves had used the keys to enter his property. This was despite the fact that there was no identifying marks on the keys to indicate which property was his.
What a stroke of luck for the thieves, finding a random set of keys on the street, locating the right house by fluke, and then pocketing a fortune in valuables. There was something that didn't sound quite right.
Alarm bells were ringing right from the start of this claim. There was an unusual set of circumstances, a high value of items had been stolen. He was also really pushy and looking for us to settle this claim straight away.
But that simply wasn't going to happen. With so many question marks, Direct Line wanted to unlock exactly what had occurred with the keys.
The second time we spoke to him, he gave us a different version of events. The first time he had told us that his wife had dropped the keys in the street. The second time we spoke to him, he changed his story, telling us that the keys had actually been inadvertently left in the lock when they left the house. This merely served to confirm our suspicions that this was a case warranting much deeper investigation.
Direct Line then analysed the photographs that Singh had supplied.
Despite his assertion that the photographs had been taken some time ago, they were actually date-stamped to within a half-hour period, 24 hours after he had said the burglary had occurred.
Proving that he had the bling in his possession all along.
The whole claim and the alleged burglary had been totally fabricated in order that he could claim £60,000 worth of money to which he was not entitled.
Unsurprisingly, he didn't receive a penny in compensation.
After rejecting his claim, we never heard any more from this individual.
But that's not where the matter rested. The case was passed to IFED, the City of London Police's Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department.
Since IFED started in 2012, we've dealt with over 1,200 people through arrests or interviews, and we've brought over 100 people to justice in courts.
This elite squad has prevented millions of pounds being paid out to criminals in fraudulent claims. IFED started an investigation into Mr. Singh and the very many versions of what had happened.
Looking at all the evidence that we were given, it was obvious to us that there had been no burglary, and this was a fairly blatant attempt to try and carry out insurance fraud and line his own pockets.
The next stage was for them to pay Singh a visit.
When IFED detectives went to Mr. Singh's address and arrested him and carried out a search, we found his jewellery and his electrical items all safe and sound inside a safe in the house.
These photos were taken on the day of the arrest. They clearly show some of the same pieces of jewellery that Singh had said had been stolen when he submitted his claim.
I think Mr. Singh was surprised to get a knock on the door from police detectives. I think he thought that having had his insurance claim refused was the end of it. He certainly didn't expect to find himself in a police station.
Let alone court, but that's where he ended up.
When Mr. Singh appeared at the Old Bailey, he pleaded guilty to fraud, and he was sentenced to a suspended prison sentence, 100 hours community service, in order to pay £1,300 in costs and fines.
His bungled scheme to gain tens of thousands of pounds in compensation had completely backfired, and he was now much worse off than before.
This was a pretty unsophisticated attempt to defraud the insurer. There wasn't a great deal of thought put into it, as his web of lies was pretty quickly uncovered. It was certainly a very greedy attempt, though.
No matter how well or badly thought through the fraud is, would-be insurance cheats need to think twice.
The industry works really closely with police units like mine, and we will come after you.
It's no secret that railway stations with their fast-moving trains, escalators and crowds of people carry an element of risk. But most people manage to avoid any drama by using basic common sense. Most people. Any personal injury claims involving transportation company First Group are thoroughly investigated. Lee Ingram is the claims team manager and recently dealt with a railway station injury.
We received a claim following an alleged tripping incident where a gentleman's saying that he's fallen over a defective paving slab.
According to the man, he took a heavy fall that resulted in a horrific injury.
The claim that came in was for a compound fracture to the shin bone, so it's one of the bigger bones in your leg. The compound fracture element means that the bone is broken and has actually pierced the skin. It sounds like a pretty nasty injury, and it is.
It was no surprise then that the claimant was after a substantial amount of compensation.
The value of the claim was around about £55,000, comprising of the injury itself. There would have been a loss of earnings claim, a care claim arising from the fact he would have needed help with domestic chores, and the legal cost bills on top of that.
Lee's team decided to track down the offending paving slab, which was said to have caused the trip. They were expecting to find a crater. Instead, they found this. A tiny crack, approximately 3 millimeters deep, the same thickness as a pound coin. This element of his story was starting to look groundless, so they checked the station's CCTV to look at where on the platform the accident happened. The man can be seen at the far end of the platform, at the top of the screen.
The defect that he's alleging is nowhere near there, is some 30 feet away from where he's actually saying it happened. It doesn't even get to that part of the platform.
The man's story was starting to look shaky, and rewinding the tape even further caused it to fall down completely.
So here comes the gentleman up to the gate, and lo and behold, he's actually limping when he comes into the station. So this is before the incident's even happened. He goes through the barrier. He's obviously in a rush to catch a train, so he's run through the barrier as quickly as he can. He's taken a very sharp right-hand turn, and then he stops. That's the point where his leg is snapped, and the bone is probably on the outside of his body by now. He can't go on any further.
And neither could his claim. The CCTV showed that after snapping the bone, he could barely hobble to the nearest bench. So while the horrific injury was real, the alleged reason for it happening was completely false.
The evidence in this case is particularly convincing in the fact that it flies in the face of everything that he said.
The claimant's version of events simply didn't stand up to scrutiny, but the real kicker was a piece of witness evidence.
Paramedics were called and they've arrived quite quickly. This chap has actually told them that he's injured his leg earlier that day, so he was already carrying an injury, as we've seen from the footage. Fortunately, his comments to the paramedics were witnessed by a gentleman who was working for us, but he previously worked for the Met Police for 19 years, so a very credible witness to have overheard this particular statement.
By this stage, the man's claim had been run into the ground.
In light of the overwhelming evidence, which showed that everything this gentleman was saying just wasn't true, we had no choice but to turn this claim down, and funnily enough, we've never heard back.
The claimant finally accepted that the claim had hit the buffers and that he had only himself to blame for the injury.
I do feel sorry for the guy, but yeah, really, he shouldn't be trying to blame us for the incident when he knows full well there was no defect. Once we looked at the CCTV footage, he just didn't have a leg to stand on.